For the BONE.6 standard, we'll be covering the appendicular skeleton this time. The standard reads, I can identify the bones of the appendicular skeleton, including the pectoral girdle, pelvic girdle, upper limbs, and lower limbs. These bones are covered in sections 7.8 through 7.11 in your textbook. So this slide again is a review. You should already have these notes written down. It's just here to remind us that the axial skeleton included our skull, vertebral column, and thoracic cage. And today, our appendicular skeleton is going to cover the girdles as well as the upper and lower limbs. So what do I mean by girdle? A girdle is a place where a lot of different bones come together. It's a complex joint. And you have two primary girdles on your body. The pectoral girdle is what we're going to cover first. So your first subheading is bones of the pectoral girdle. This is where the arm, the shoulder, the rib cage, all of these bones come together. Ultimately, I'm just going to refer to it as bones of the shoulder. So to name some specific bones here, your clavicle is your collarbone. It extends from the sternum over to this piece of your shoulder blade known as the scapula. Scapulae is the plural, scapula is the singular, and that is your shoulder blade. So we see these two bones coming together. Your collarbone connects to your shoulder blade. Also featured, your humerus is your upper arm bone, and then we'll cover that on the next slide as well, but you can see this round epiphysis right here meeting into the shoulder blade as well. So these three bones are the primary ones discussed when we're talking about your pectoral girdle. All right, bones of the arm, bones of the upper limb. We've already mentioned the humerus, which is your upper arm bone. There's only one bone there. It's bigger than the other two in the lower arm, but there's just one. We see space here for biceps and triceps attaching to each end of this epiphysis. You have two lower arm bones, the radius and the ulna, and they can be a little tricky to remember which is which. They're roughly the same size, but they're sort of oriented in opposite ways, with the big end of the ulna being your elbow and the radius being up here near your wrist. The way that I remember them is that the radius connects to your thumb. So if you feel the two bones in your arm, in your lower arm, the one that's connecting up to your thumb is your radius. The one that's going towards your pinky is your ulna. If you feel your elbow for a second, that is also you feeling your ulna. That is the lower portion of it. Down to your hand, you have 8 wrist bones, which are known as carpals. These are short bones. They have very limited range of motion between each other, but they allow you a big range of motion in your wrist. Your hand bones are called metacarpals, and you have 5 of them, leading into 14 phalanges, which in this case refer to your finger bones. These are examples of long bones down here, your metacarpals and your phalanges, but they're very small. Down to the pelvis, we have a few different bones coming together to make up your hip bones. The big flares that you can see on top, those are known as the ilium. They're superior compared to the rest of your pelvis. They're the ones you can feel if you can feel your hips on the anterior side of your abdomen. And they tend to be flared outwards in women and more straight up and down in men. So oftentimes this is one way that we can identify the biological sex of a skeleton if it's found out of context. The ischium is the lower bone, so they're the ones underneath here. They're known more as your sit bones. The shape that they form in between them also helps us determine gender. Women tend to have much wider arches in between their ischium, and men much more narrow, closer to 90 degrees. Lastly, the anterior portion is known as the pubis bone. These 3 bones, the ilium, ischium, and pubis, all look and function as one piece, but much like the skull, they're independent bones that have fused together. Also included in the pelvic girdle is the sacrum and coccyx, though we covered them in the axial skeleton video. The bones of the leg mirror a lot the bones of the arm in terms of composition. We have an upper leg bone known as the femur. This is going to be one of the biggest, heaviest bones in your body. We see this nice rounded epiphysis here ready to fit into the hips. We have lower leg bones as well, but they're not as equally sized. The tibia is much larger and it's also situated more medial. The fibula is smaller and it sits on the outside. A lot of people get these mixed up. They'll call them tibula and fibia, things like that. So make sure you're clear on the fact that it's tibia and fibula. Something that is unique to the leg and to the knee joint in particular is the existence of a bone there. So we don't have an elbow bone, it's just part of your ulna, but you do have a kneecap, and it's your patella, a very unique sesamoid bone providing protection to that extremely important knee joint. You have 8 ankle bones, one of which is really big, and it's called the calcaneus, and it's what you feel in your heel, supports a lot of weight. You have 5 metatarsals, which are your foot bones, and then again 14 phalanges, but instead of your fingers, these are making up your toes.